So we have another Toronto-based London, Ontario.
Not the sexy London, the other one.
So Carlen traveled here to be with us today because she is one of a kind. There is no one else that we could find anywhere. We had to import her.
Yeah.
She's a sexologist and a psychotherapist, and she is the founder of the Everyday Goddess, which teaches women how to love themselves and how to embrace their sexuality, their sensuality, and to be intimate with themselves or a partner. So first of all, do you have anything else you want to say about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So actually in all the swag bags, you'll see a little postcard and a little magnet. And if you follow the links, you can go on and check out some of the work that I am doing with this really fierce and awesome community of women to empower themselves sensually, sexually, and to embody living an unapologetically passionate lifestyle. So the Everyday Goddess is a lifestyle brand, but a portion of the proceeds of all of the merch goes towards the Goddess Foundation, which is a charity I founded this year. And we are going to be funding projects that empower women all across Canada. So check it out, and if you have any questions. But let's get back to this stuff too. Let's talk about this.
So sex and cannabis is something that, where did it come in my life? I had great sex when I was high. And
Yeah.
What is this about? Tell me more. I've been with my husband for 20 years, and so you get to a point where you're like, okay, let's mix this up a little bit. And I have friends, same place. Some people choose to have affairs. Some people choose to just completely distance themselves from their partner. It's a really, really hard thing to figure out how to continue to be intimate with somebody that you're going through life with, which is difficult, right?
Yes.
And so cannabis, there are physiological reasons why you relax, why time slows down, why someone's touch is like really profound when you felt it a million times and all of a sudden it's new, right? It's just amazing to me that cannabis does have such a role in a healthy, intimate relationship. So let's start with why. How does it work with our body?
Why? So when we consume cannabis, right, we're stimulating what's called the endocannabinoid system. So the or you can also call it just the cannabinoid system, because the cannabinoid system was just discovered, what was it, 1997, I believe it was? 1997 was when we really, it's kind of like the clitoris in that way, right? Like we didn't discover it until the 80s. It's quite interesting. However, the cannabinoid system, right, is an immuno-neurological and receptor system in our bodies. So we naturally produce cannabinoids, they're called endocannabinoids in our body. So there's two different kinds. Well, there's a few different kinds, but the two biggest ones are anandamide and 2-AG, right? Anandamide mimics the impact, or mimics phytocannabinoids, which is what we find in cannabis when we consume, ingest, smoke, all of the different types of cannabis like THC, and 2-AG mimics CBD, right? So it's kind of fun that this whole time, our bodies were actually made to consume cannabis, right? So that makes me really excited because I'm like, oh, okay, this is really fun when you start looking into the science of it, right? And so when our bodies are already made to consume cannabis, it tells me, or to consume these phytocannabinoids, which we can also find in plants like echinacea, lavender, chamomile as well, right? I know, I'm mind blown. I know, it's amazing, right? So our bodies are already made to do these. So when we consume cannabis, we are feeding these receptors. And quite often when we're lacking of a libido, or we're experiencing a lot of anxiety, even depression. So we can look at a few different points of reference in order to bring our body back into homeostasis and balance. One of those places is in your gut, right? We often talk about mental health, but I think one of the things that I love to talk about also is gut health, right? So gut health really impacts your mental health, but also gut health your gut is where you have the second highest number of receptors, of endocannabinoid receptors, which is really great because that also tells me that our bodies are made for pleasure and to experience this pleasure because of consuming and stimulating the cannabinoid system. Just bring me back if I just go.
I want to back up.
Yeah, bring me back.
Sometimes when I talk a lot like you are right now.
I know.
So you said
back to pleasure.
the second. Okay, so I understand it as the pelvic region has
Yes.
the second highest number of receptors in our body as women, second to our brain. You
Yes.
said gut.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah, your pelvic region. Thank you for that. Yes.
So that piece of advice or that piece of knowledge is why I went all in with women for Vanderpop. It did not start as a female-focused brand. It was designed for it. I'm a designer by training. And when I found out that our bodies were intended, specifically our pelvic region, to interact with this plant, and people are suffering from menstrual cramps, menopause, unable to orgasm,
Yes.
the whole thing, and this plant can help with all of those.
All of those.
Yeah, so
Yes.
It's
Menstruation, vaginismus, low libido, even bonding to your child, bonding to your partner especially, all of those things. It literally stimulates you to experience and balance and bring your body back to balance, which pleasure and receiving pleasure and giving pleasure and feeling good is what our bodies are made for as well.
but our minds get in the way, and they won't
Hey.
let us do that most of the time.
Yeah.
So you are a sexologist, a psychotherapist.
Yes.
When do you introduce cannabis into the conversation with your patients?
Yeah. So it varies. I do work with an MD, so I'm based out of London, Ontario. My private practice is based out of London, Ontario, but I do see clients, patients all over the world due to technology, thank you. But I do work with MDs to help women especially, which is my specialization, to access cannabis. I've been working and supporting women with that for a couple of years now. And generally speaking, what we do is, in the first kind of session, we talk about what's going on, right? What's going on? What medications also are you already on? Because some people do understand or don't understand that some of the medications that you are on will actually decrease your libido and make it harder for you to experience pleasure, such as
What are some of those?
antidepressants, especially. Antidepressants have a really big impact on your ability to experience pleasure. So when women come to me and they're telling me, I'm on this medication, or I'm just not feeling bonded to my partner, or my anxiety, I'm not able to get out of my head, and I can't have an orgasm, I can't feel pleasure, right? I can't connect with not only my partner but myself, right? And that's where I start. I always start off by saying, how do you connect with yourself? Because if you can't connect with yourself, then how am I going to get you to connect with anybody else? Because that's really where it starts. And then it's about offering options. So I would actually consider myself to be a cannabis advocate. I know we talked about all of that, but I consider myself to be a cannabis advocate as well as a medical cannabis user. It's something I like to often bring my patients, my clients, options. So sometimes it's about, hey, do you want to just use more lube? Sometimes it's about, let's look at your nutrition. Sometimes it is about, let's looking at your mental health, and sometimes it is looking at various tools such as cannabis as an option to increase your pleasure capacity.
So before and after, give us a happy story of someone who chose to use cannabis as a tool in their intimate relationship, and how it transformed their, maybe even just relationship with themselves, but with their partners. I think what we're really looking for. Does it go from not having sex at all to just having sex, and that's a huge first step? It's trauma. You work with a lot of patients that go through trauma.
Yes.
So perhaps good to talk about that too.
Let's talk about that. So I do work and support women who have experienced trauma in their lives, whether in a variety of different forms. And I do have some beautiful clients who I just adore. And some of those women have gone from, there's one woman in particular who has gone from experiencing various types of trauma, including being raped multiple times in her life, and then not being to using her sexuality as a way to cope in her young adolescence and young adult life, to connecting with a partner, and then actually losing the ability to have orgasms, not losing, but I'm going to say misplacing, being challenged to climax, to actually introducing cannabis as, we start off actually as a topical, right? So using cannabis as a topical tool, so using it as a lubricant or as a cream, as a massage cream, and using it that way to allow her vagina to actually calm down just naturally, because her mind was getting in the way quite a bit. So that's why I love the fitness piece. So it's so fantastic. But she started using it in that way, and then slowly we started getting her to use oils in her system, and now she had to adjust it, consuming oils orally to kind of bring her back to feeling safe in her own body, with the support of psychotherapy as well. So she had her first orgasm last year again, and I was so happy and so excited for her. I get like, oh look, my little goosebumps. I just get so into it, and it was wonderful, and it's beautiful, especially when we look at plant medicine as a tool to help us through traumas. And I want to be clear that trauma, and that definition of trauma, means something different to every single person in this room. So to some people it is about sexual assault, and to some people it is actually about pregnancy and labor. To some people it is about emotional abuse, and it just goes on and on. And this is what I love about cannabis, is that if we can, as we are having these conversations, to use cannabis as the plant medicine that it is, it brings us back to what I love about being a woman, and it is tapping into that feminine, that divine feminine, that sacredness that we kind of have within us. And we can talk about that.
And
that's a whole other.
It's a female plant, right?
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
So I had you clarify that the oil was taken orally. So we're going to get to the stuff while we're all here.
Yeah.
Because you can also insert a suppository that's infused with cannabis in your vagina or in your anus. Yes. So you have 5 layers of vaginal tissue. So it's a slower absorption through the vagina, and you're not going to get a head high. That's not how it works. You're basically, all the cannabinoids within the suppository are all working with the receptors in your pelvic region. They kind of get stuck there, making those receptors happy.
Yeah.
Your anus has 1 layer of vaginal tissue. If you choose to do that, you will get really high. Foria, their first product was 60 milligrams of THC. Wow. That's a lot straight to the bloodstream. So
don't do that.
No, it's CBD and there's a little bit of THC. Yeah. But I only mention this because, I mean, anal sex is fine, right? It's great.
Yeah.
And it's also super painful, so.
Can be.
Yeah. But using a suppository helps.
Yes.
So the suppository is like bullet size, and it's with MCT, which is defractionalized coconut oil. Fractionated coconut oil. So that means it'll stay in solid form. You insert it vaginally. You put your legs up for 15 minutes so that it will melt and not leak out. And its CBD is a natural muscle relaxant, so it's great for cramps. For me, I can't, my body won't relax, right? Like, even though if I get high and maybe I want to sit still, I can't. So when you are, when you relax from your core, there's nothing like that, right? Like your body is relaxed, you are relaxed. For me, there has been no other way to experience that sensation other than this suppository. So,
can I just speak to that quickly? So, just kind of back to the endocannabinoid system. So, when we do actually climax, right, we release 2-AG. So, one orgasm and the release of 2-AG, the cannabinoid the endocannabinoid in our system, actually mimics the amount of cannabinoids you would receive from smoking one joint, right? Yeah. Isn't that great? So our body already kind of creates, like through climax, through orgasm, right? And it's that dopamine release. It feels really, really great. There was a bigger point that I was going to get to, but it was about pleasure and experiencing pleasure. So we can use suppositories in our system to have sex, or I love to use things like the Levo machine, or to make my own lubricant, right, with either a coconut butter, or coconut oil, because coconut oil is an actual natural antibacterial, or a cacao butter, because I love chocolate. I think the sacredness and the beautiful plant medicine that chocolate is and cannabis kind of really go quite well together, or olive oil, right? However, if you're going to be using these oils for sex and for sexual pleasure, and you're using latex condoms though as your barrier method, right? They're not necessarily compatible. They aren't compatible, right? So an oil will break down latex literally in a matter of seconds. So that's just something to be aware of, how you are using a barrier to prevent STIs, as well as contraceptive methods as well. So just as an awareness of that.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. But one of sorry, can I
Did you think of your point?
I did think of my point. Is that okay? Okay. So one thing that even just, and we're just going to talk personal here because this is what I do, right? If I can,
on there.
Yeah, we're going there, right? So one of the things that I talk about is our ability and women's ability to experience climax. And most people in this room will know that the only way that they can actually feel or have an orgasm is through clitoral stimulation, right? But everyone is kind of always after that deepness, that feeling of vaginal orgasm, right? Through stimulation, the G-spot and other parts of your vagina, right? One of the things that I have come to recognize is through using cannabis as a lubricant, is that I am actually able to have, or we're almost there actually, my partner and I, we're almost there, to experience a deeper vaginal orgasm or deeper vaginal pleasure by having now introduced cannabis into our lovemaking, our sex, all that fun stuff that we do. But especially as a lubricant, right? So if you're looking to expand or go beyond just kind of that same kind of pleasure that you experience over and over again, one of the ways that you can do that is to introduce cannabis, especially a nice high CBD based oil, into your pleasure play.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was the point I wanted to make.
So the first time Carlen and I were on a panel together was in Toronto, and an audience member asked, she wanted to introduce cannabis into her sex life with her partner, and her partner is a recovering addict. So she felt like that was a decision that they made jointly, and was asking for advice in that arena. And one of the things that was brought up was, well, do you have to tell him if it's not going to affect him? You can smell the cannabis in the oil. So don't try to trick anybody, because yeah, I thought I was going to go real heavy there.
Yeah.
But did you talk to her afterwards?
Yes. Yeah, I did talk to her.
And I'm sure that, or perhaps someone in this room is in the same position, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is tricky.
Well, I mean, I come from Ontario, right? Southwestern Ontario. I know Alberta has a bit of a fentanyl and opioid crisis, but so are we big time in Southwestern Ontario. And I've actually worked in the harm reduction needle exchange and volunteered there and worked with the wonderful people there. So I'm a big advocate of that work. So working with people with addictions is something that I am kind of familiar with. And so I kind of just talked to her and I said, there's a difference, right? And there's a difference. And there's a difference between cannabis and how we can use cannabis and why you are using cannabis. And being able to communicate that to your partner is really, really important, right? And talking about how it doesn't have to be a shared experience, he doesn't have to be involved in it, and the various ways that, in the modalities that we can consume it as well, right? Because weed isn't the same as it was when we were growing up, right? It impacts us all differently. So what I said to her was, you can choose to not tell him, which from a psychotherapeutic perspective, probably not the best. However, having that open line of conversation and communicating to them how this is actually supporting you just as you are going through your challenges in your life and the different things that you are using as a tool to support you through your addictions, right, can actually be compatible. So she actually emailed me after and said that she did, and it was a really great conversation. Yeah.
Where are we, Lauren, in terms of time? I keep vibing. Okay. So we're going to turn this over to the audience. If you all have any questions.
I have a really practical question on the last thing you just spoke about.
Yes.
Is it going to enter both your bloodstreams?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I have a partner who's a pilot who can't touch. So
Yeah, pilots
no
can.
problem with my, but so that would not be an option.
Yeah, so using it, as a lubricant probably is not an option because it would enter in their bloodstreams. However, ingesting it through vaping or smoking or an edible or taking a pill, that would be a much better option for you. Yeah. Oh, hi.
Hey, more of a comment. You guys have seen me standing in the back for the last hour and a half. So I have lumbar degenerative disc disease and scoliosis, which makes its way into a lot of young ladies' lives between 33 and 35.
Yeah.
That's pretty young to have that kind of life sentence. And I know for a fact that without cannabis, my ability to make friends or date and be a real person has improved greatly since cannabis and cannabis has been introduced to my life. So just from a standpoint of just being a human being and our need to be connected to the world, it's a terribly critical conversation we're having right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. First off, thanks for starting the dialogue, really educational and insightful. So a question around, actually made a comment about consuming while around your menstrual cycle. Can you provide maybe more insights in when not to, and how that may even tie into kind of sexuality piece of it?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. Okay. I love talking about this so much. And just so we're gonna just go quick baseline here. However, I am developing a bigger piece with Vanderpump that is going to be released on the blog in the next couple months, and we're going to go through the entire cycle and talk about how we can use cannabis variant, which is variant on your cycle. So, essentially, what you need to know is because we have estrogen, right? Not only is cannabis a female plant, but it plays off of the estrogen of women. So, the lower your estrogen, the higher your tolerance, okay? So, premenopausal, postmenopausal, even just throughout your cycle, that is something for women to be aware of because it does impact essentially what you're feeling and how what's going on. So when you're ovulating, right, your progesterone is much higher, right? So you will want to actually smoke more, and it'll have a bit of a less of an impact on you, right? Whereas versus when you're menstruating or right after menstruating, when your estrogen spikes up, right, you can take like a couple puffs, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm pretty high, right? So if you are looking at your menstrual cycle, just look to see, and this is why I love the journal that is in all the books, right? So look to see, as you're tracking your use, also track where you are in your cycle so that you can relate to what kind of cannabis you want to use, and then how it will benefit your cycle. But CBD definitely always for kind of the cramping, which is does that kind of help? But we're gonna go more into it. But that's kind of the big key of it is estrogen and the endocannabinoid system. Really, a lot of really big stuff in there. Yeah.
So you're talking about your times, but what about menopause?
Menopause,
Yeah.
right? So menopause, decrease in estrogen, right? So, your doctor will tell you to eat more sweet potato or take topical creams or lavender, just so everybody knows. Here's a fun fact. Lavender, and I'm big into essential oils, I'm big into diffusing oils, but lavender actually increases our estrogen, right? So for those of you who have young boys and you're diffusing an awful lot of lavender at night and you're wondering why they're crying so much, just a side thought, right? So, yeah, ooh, mind blown, right? Oh, I'm so serious, I'm dead serious. So, in terms of menopausal women, I actually like to make, and I like to make kind of my own little suppository sometimes, and I put a couple drops of lavender, especially at times of my month where I am experiencing more dryness because of more progesterone, less estrogen, that type of thing. So I use some coconut oil, I use a little bit of CBD oil, and a couple drops of lavender, and I use that kind of as a lubricant for myself, for self-pleasure, or when I'm with my partner. Now, if you add a little bit of garlic to that, you can also use it to treat yeast infections. So, hey, yeah, super great. Yeah, or a touch of tea tree oil, melaleuca as well. But yes, but especially when it comes to menopausal women, right? That's essentially what you want to be looking at.
Yes.
I just have a question about kind of potential harm in products that you might find. Because with licensed producers and legal dispensaries, you're always going to know what's in there and you're going to make sure the product is safe.
Yes.
But when you're looking at maybe lubricants, butters, whatever it may be, are there any ingredients you should look out for to make sure you're not utilizing it around your vaginas or anything like that?
Sugar, yeah. So
Will you repeat the question?
Go ahead. Oh, sorry. So the question was, if you're going from purchasing from a licensed producer, or you know exactly what's in it, but sometimes you have Karen down the street who's making some cocoa butter and you're not really sure what's in it, or people, the industry is just booming. Or if you're making it with your Levo, right? What do you need to be aware of, especially if you're using it in your vagina? And one of the things is sugar contents, right? That's why I'm actually kind of not a big fan of all flavored lubes either, right? Because I'm quite sensitive, so yeast infection just like that, or a UTI, right? So that's why I'm really big on just natural oils. So just like the coconut oils or the olive oils, the grapeseed oils, that type of thing. So it's mostly sugar that you want to be looking out for because, but everything else, I also practice from everything is natural. So if there's an ingredient in something that I can't read, it doesn't go in or on my body, essentially. So I would just be aware of that kind of thing. And always ask, right? Thank you for this gift. What's in it? Right?
I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations for certain terpenes or strains that do increase the libido for women?
Yeah, great question. So CBD, higher CBD will help that. So if you're looking at certain, like we said, everything has a different name to it, right? So you're looking for a higher CBD, preferably, in terms of especially just relieving pain and getting your vaginal muscles to relax. Now, in terms of the terpenes, I'm still kind of doing a little bit of research on that, especially. Now, if you use like a limonene, right, and you use it and then you think, you're having sex with Mr. Clean, that's because of the lemon flavor, right? That's what that is. So, the terpenes, I'm going to be doing a little bit more research on that, but essentially, for now, just stick to kind of like the higher CBDs and pay attention. Yeah, thanks.
So year one, lubes and oils and suppositories, no, not oils, lubes and suppositories will not be available in rec stores, is that correct?
Yes.
What about from the medical side? Because what I understand is Cannabis is the only one right now that has the 40 line.
Yeah.
And they have suppositories?
Yeah.
Okay, do you see the medical side in the next year increasing that, or does?
Fingers crossed.
We have a correction, so that's true. They have a topical oil, but they don't have suppositories.
Oh, yeah, they don't.
So nobody has that. there's a giant black market. So you can make your own. Is there like the kits that you come with the Levo that have suppository, gelatin
How do you
caps?
make yours?
Well, so how do I make mine, right? So there's two different ways you can do it. So you can actually go to health food stores and buy like vegetable capsules, right? That disintegrate quite quickly, but sometimes it's not fast enough, right? Like when sex only lasts like 20 minutes, 10 minutes. 5 minutes for some people, right? You know what I mean? Like that's not enough time. All of a sudden your vagina's high and everything is done. So how I make mine is I use I'll mix it up with not a fractionated coconut oil, but a defractionated coconut oil, so that gets hard, right? When it gets warm. Pardon?
MCT?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. That was the word. I was like, what is that word? And I'll just mix it in a bowl, and then I'll just freeze it. So they kind of turn into like little pucks, right? Or you can
Freeze it in like a small ice tray that has.
Yeah, the silicone ones.
Okay.
So sometimes they're like star shaped, sometimes they're like little heart shapes, right? So I have like little silicone. Yeah, so did you have a comment to that?
Yeah, you can, well, I just read this, that, you know those bubble tea straws?
Yeah.
The really thick straws? So fill those and then you just cut them.
That's it. Yeah, I love that giant straw. See, this is what I love about cannabis and sex. Brings women together. Yeah. I love it. Yeah, so that's really great. If you want to squeeze it out, right? You can squeeze it out.
Well, you could freeze them, I guess, and then cut them.
Oh yes, and then
And then you have these little suppositories.
For anyone that missed that, if you are looking to create your own suppositories, I don't know if Vanderpump condones this, but
I have it on my website. Actually, if you want to look on my website, I have the recipes on my website.
so the recipe, and then you put it in a bubble tea straw, freeze it, and then cut the straw, and you have your individual doses. It's so brilliant. It's so smart. We have a question here.
Oh, I have pictures on my phone. Anybody wants to see?
Of what?
Of what?
Hold on a second. Hold on.
The product.
Okay.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
I just wanted to say, I don't know if it's because of my condition, but CBD doesn't do anything for me.
Are you
So-
using hemp-derived CBD or?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. You
So
know the difference.
THC is better for you?
Yeah,
See, I'm a THC person as well.
yeah.
It works better for me. Like I'm a THC over CBD.
I just wanted to that THC, like for sex, is great.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason why is because THC actually stimulates your blood flow as well. So that's one of the reasons why. But yeah, the dopamine.
And recently, they've been, some of the reports are saying that we've long thought that CBD helps with sleep, but it's looking like it's actually THC.
It brings you into REM slow wave sleep much quicker, actually.
Any other questions?
Hey.
Carlen.
Hey,
can
Ashley.
you I love hearing you talk. This makes me so excited. So excited. Can you talk about cotton vagina?
Yes! Yes, I can. So, for those of you who have or have not, anyways, cannabis, when we consume cannabis, essentially through smoking, is kind of the biggest way of this. I mean, I actually find it when I all the cannabis, even orally. So when I consume cannabis, and most people when they consume cannabis, what it does is that it triggers your salivary glands to close, right? And that's called xerostomia. So the reason why it does that is because your CB1 receptors, number one, is in your head, right? Well, number 2 is in your pelvic region. So kind of what happens in your head is also happening in your pelvic region. So I know, right? So we get what's called cotton mouth, right? So we get a dryness in our mouth when we consume cannabis because it blocks the salivary glands. But it also does that in your vagina. So many women, and especially the menopausal, premenopausal women in here, right, need to be aware because you're already experiencing a bit of a dryness, right? And all women, depending on their time of month as well, right, also can experience cotton vagina, is what I like to call it, right? Because you can experience a higher degree of dryness, of vaginal dryness. So if you are consuming cannabis and using it for pleasure, please always use a lubricant that is compatible with your barrier or contraceptive method to avoid tearing because of that layer of epithelial cells we have in our vagina and in our anus, especially if you're having anal sex, because there is only one layer, right? This is why anal sex is considered a higher risk activity. Super fun, but just higher risk because of the ability to tear much easier, right? So thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah.
And that applies to your eyes too, right?
Yes.
Sphincter, I think is
Yeah.
Also?
Yeah. And your nose.
And your nose, right?
Yeah, because you have the same tissue in your nose as you do in your genitals. So you'll actually notice if you're aroused, this is just kind of a side note, but if you're aroused and you sneeze a lot or you get like an itchy nose or people's noses start to run, it's because you're stimulating the endocannabinoid system and it's a natural antihistamine. So like it stimulates your natural or THC as well actually is a natural antihistamine. So it makes you kind of sneezy. And
that happens when I smoke it.
Yeah.
With terpenes, make my nose really itchy.
Yeah. So if your arousal can mean for some people itchy nose. Is that funny?
Any other questions?
Did we have any outstanding questions from the other panelists as well?
Panelists, come on up.
I was just going to ask in the parenting one, there's not a lot of research, it seems like, on smoking and being pregnant or smoking and breastfeeding. Do you have anything to say on that?
Carlen said that she just read something.
But go ahead, Ashley. You go.
Oh,
you go.
I'll just blather and then you can do the science.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the most talked about topics in a group of 2,300 women, is the lack of research. So it almost cancels itself out. Like there's a very famous study, the Jamaica study, that was done with women long-term in Jamaica that showed no real signs of developmental issues. There are other studies that contradict that. So we end up at a zero balance, basically. And yet, we have women come to us, and they are sick. They are very, very sick in their pregnancies. And they are trying to make the best decision for their own health. And many of them choose to use cannabis. A lot of them choose to use cannabis and not smoke it. And many are asking about breastfeeding as well, because we know that there are cannabinoids in breast milk. So we have a lot of ways to go in terms of research. And I always advocate for best practice and also personal choice, because it isn't so much about whether it's right or wrong. We don't know, right? We just don't know. But some of the mothers that we've seen have been in situations that they were so very, very sick that they wouldn't have made it through the pregnancies. And then we also have a lot of women with postpartum who are breastfeeding, and they are struggling tremendously. And that becomes an informed choice they have to make. So a lot of what we do, because there is so much stigma around this in particular, is we will post anonymously for them so that other women who've gone through the situation can answer, and they don't have to fear that whatever decision they make on their own terms is being judged. So that's kind of the anecdotal side of things.
Yeah, and just to 111% agree with what Ashley said, and I actually just read a study on the plane here. I had a feeling breastfeeding was going to come up, and I was like, oh, I gotta read this. So there are a few different studies, but the one that I read And I'm pro, it's your choice. I'm a very pro-choice across the board and all the things, really, especially when it comes to your health and your ability to care for others. However, the study that I was reading was that cannabis consumption can actually decrease your prolactin production.
What's that?
So the breast milk, the good stuff in the breast milk, that helps support the development of the baby. Now, it can decrease that, and then if you're consuming cannabis, right, it comes out in your breast milk in small doses. Here's what the study said though. 0 to 3 months, 0 to 3 months is when you see kind of the biggest impact, but up to about a year, you may see a decrease in fetal birth weight and psychomotor ability. However, once that child reaches to about a year, it's fine. The baby adjusts, the child adjusts, and the study even said, they were like, it's kind of just, you just kind of have to pay attention in the first year, especially if you're breastfeeding, but then after a year, the baby adjusts and everybody's fine, right? So our bodies just work through it because we have the endocannabinoid system, which can metabolize it for us, right? So it's just about not being alarmed if you are consuming cannabis and just understanding what the impact is going to have on your child and how you can support you and your child. But, you know, it's just like when you are in a plane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on anybody else, right? And I'm a big believer in that with mothers. You have to take, and parents, you have to take care of yourself so that you can be the best mom you can be for your child.
Dr. Carlen, you know what? I just want to ask you about that study, because one of the things that comes up a lot now isn't just using cannabis in breastfeeding, but also how much of this is being studied just THC-based cannabis? Like, are we talking about CBD? Like, did they reference that at all in the study? Because those are two kind of very different compounds.
Yeah, they reference mostly THC in the study, but you and I will read it after. I'll actually send it to you. I can't remember the differentiation. I was on the plane, I'm not gonna lie. It just was the key points. It's like, okay.
Do you remember what magazine it was in or when it was published so that people can look that up?
It was just on, hold on, now I have to remember if it was on PubMed or if it was one of the journals I have access to, like through Science Direct.
It wasn't in like WestJet or...
No, it was actually like a scholarly journal, yeah, absolutely. And if anybody's curious, I downloaded, I have the PDF, so I can send it to you if you want to read that. Specifically was breastfeeding and cannabis use, and I swear it was between 2014 and 2017 that the study was done.
That's awesome. All right, I think we've had our last question. If you do have any other questions and you'd like to ask them one-on-one or in private to any of us as panelists, please do not hesitate, or get an email address if you want to do it at a later date. I am so happy to see so many people in this room. This is really more than we could have asked for. And your participation, your enthusiasm, and your support is obviously makes it so much easier to be up here. So thank you. I hope you've learned more than you could handle, and you've written down notes furiously, and you will continue to educate yourself and others, right? The more you know, the more you can confidently share with others who could really benefit from this knowledge, and we really need as many advocates. Yes, we use that word. Yeah. What's another word we can use? Brand ambassadors. Educators, as we can get. We do have a partner. We have a partner brand. I sold my company to Tokyo Smoke. I think I mentioned that earlier. And Tokyo Smoke has a store that's opening here in Calgary, and in the Beltline. Is that the name of the neighborhood? Yeah.